The art of peace and the science of living. Sadly, the word peace is bandied about rather too much nowadays. TV advertisements for life insurance promise us peace of mind if we sign on the dotted line. And politicians talk about bringing peace to troubled places in a rather dry manner. Some even say that wars are essential to keep down the surplus population. Not many have an even approximate idea of what the word peace really conveys in a spiritual sense. This is because the majority of people do not comprehend what spirituality really is. So in this talk, we are going deep into the world of peace and silence, despite all the fireworks. Now, I owe quite a bit to a book by a Japanese writer called Morihei Ueshiba. And the first statement in the book says, "The art of peace begins with you. Work on yourself and your appointed task in the art of peace. Everyone has a spirit that can be refined, a body that can be trained in some manner, a suitable path to follow. You are here for no other purpose than to realize your inner divinity and manifest your innate enlightenment. Foster peace in your own life and then apply the art to all that you encounter." So they're very wise words. It's a really good book. Well, Morihei Ueshiba was the founder of Aikido and was born in Japan on December 14th, 1883. As a boy, he was weak and made up his mind to study martial arts. He practiced almost all the existing martial arts around at the time. He went from teacher to teacher, absorbing all that he could, and became a great master himself in time. He also pursued spiritual studies and had a couple of profound experiences that turned his mind away from violence and towards the founding of Aikido, which is a non-violent martial art. As a child, he studied Zen under Mitsujo Fujimoto of the Shigon school of Buddhism. He later embraced the Shinto sect of Moto-kyo, founded by Wanisaburo Deguchi. By combining his martial training and his religious and political ideologies, Ueshiba created the modern martial art of Aikido. He died in 1969. So let's try to investigate and explore some of these ideas. I think that many negative forces try to instill our minds with the idea that a peaceful state is not possible or desirable. But the way I see it, until we achieve a state of peace, we will not be able to comprehend truly spiritual things. We must also come to understand that peace is not a passive state of being, as is generally understood, but the opposite. Well, that's true of the kind of peace I'm talking about anyway. The Master KH writes in the Mahatma letters, "It is upon the serene and placid surface of the unruffled mind that the visions gathered from the invisible find a representation in the visible world. Otherwise, you would be vainly seek those visions, those flashes of sudden light, which have already helped to solve so many of the minor problems and which alone can bring the truth before the eye of the soul. It is with jealous care that we have to guard our mind plane from all the adverse influences which daily arise in our passage through earth life." So very profound words. So man has long sought for peace, but for as long as that, he has found reasons that it can never be. William Wordsworth speaks of that blessed mood in which the burthen of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. That serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. He was very profound, William Wordsworth. He had, like a lot of the poets, had a deep vision of the truth. So this has nothing to do with psychism or emotionalism. It is a natural state in which we become part of the nature we have lost touch with, and we are on the path to becoming truly human. The Buddha says, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Better than 1,000 hollow verses is one verse that brings peace. Better than 100 hollow lines is one line that brings peace. And how many hollow words do we use every day? It is possible to use words in such a way that they can heal and inspire. In many ways, the words we use are precious jewels. We can plant them like flowers in the garden of another's mind and heart. But often we prefer to fatten our intellect rather than ease the pain of others. Now, in the 1960s, there was a movement that arose to promote peace and love in the world. Some people believed that a flower had power. But of course, it was a symbol of something that was gentle and harmless. The idea was good, but too many hangers-on and a lack of discipline caused it to break down quickly, though a few did carry on along the original lines. H.P. Blavatsky writes, neither happiness nor prosperity are always the best of bedfellows for such undeveloped mortals as most of us are. They seldom bring with them peace, which is the only permanent joy. The idea of peace is usually connected with the close of life and a religious state of mind. That kind of peace will, however, generally be found to contain the element of expectation. The pleasures of this world have been surrendered, and the soul waits contentedly in expectation of the pleasures of the next. The peace of the philosophic mind is very different from this and can be attained to early in life, when pleasure has scarcely been tasted, as well as when it has been fully drunk of. The American transcendentalists discovered that life could be made a sublime thing without any assistance from circumstances or outside sources of pleasure and prosperity. Of course, this has been discovered many times before, and Emerson only took up again the cry raised by Epictetus. But every man and woman has to discover this fact freshly for himself. And when once he realizes it, he knows that he would be a wretch if he did not endeavor to make the possibility a reality in his own life. The Stoic became sublime because he recognized his own absolute responsibility and did not try to evade it. The transcendentalist was even more because he had faith in the unknown and untried possibilities which lay within himself. The occultist fully recognizes the responsibility and claims his title by having both tried and acquired knowledge of his own possibilities. So the knowledge that must be acquired is, of course, not just intellectual, but knowledge that takes us beyond the intellect that we so prize. This is a test to let go of that intellect when we are ready to do so. It can become a barrier at a certain stage, a comfort zone, and our lives are full of comfort zones in which there is a danger of stagnation. But the real comfort zone is in the higher self, if you can call it that, which is our Lord, our witness, our resting place, our asylum, and our friend, as the Bhagavad Gita tells us. Though it can become our enemy if we war against it with our allegiance to the lower self and its desires. We need to understand that when Krishna, speaking as the higher self in the Gita, says that whenever there is a decline of righteousness and an ascendance of amorality, that he is born for the protection of the good and the ending of wickedness. This just does not refer to the world, but also to the individual. Our higher self will always come to our rescue if we have the right kind of faith. As above, so below, not blind faith. That statement could also be regarded, the solar system, universe, etc., as above, so below. Robert Crosby, an early theosophist who founded the United Lodge of Theosophists, wrote about the power of the 59th minute of the 11th hour, meaning that if we have faith enlightened faith, as said, not blind faith, in our higher selves, that no matter how dark our lives are at times, at the very last moment, something will come along to shine a light into that darkness and to help us. It is like the light at the end of the tunnel. But the illumination that comes from beyond all these troubles that vex just the personal self is beyond all this. And there is eternal calm and peace. In the voice of the silence, she said that true peace and bliss could be found only in the land of silence and non-being, meaning beyond the realms of the great dire heresy of separateness that weans us from the rest, and to an oasis where we can be free from the tormenting thoughts and emotions that are like clouds obscuring the sun at times. So I think we can be deceived by the idea that peace is not attainable or desirable. The peace we are thinking of, in this case, is that which HPB describes as related to the close of life and a religious state of mind. The kind of peace we are considering in this talk is that which can be nurtured in the silence and is a positive and ennobling concept which can be practically realized in our day-to-day lives. It is also essential in the world today to have at least some people who are aware of the potency of this kind of peace and are willing to make use of it in their lives. The singer Bob Marley stated that, "Don't gain the world and lose your soul. Wisdom is better than silver or gold." I always like that statement. Don't gain the world and lose your soul. Wisdom is better than silver or gold. She's very true. There's nothing more precious than gaining true wisdom, which exalts the soul. John Lennon said, "If everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace." You know, which simple. This is simple but true again. If we put as much effort into gaining peace in ourselves and for the world as we do to accumulating material goods, then we would make considerable progress. The philosopher Spinoza also says, "For peace is not mere absence of war, but is a virtue that springs from the force of character." Interesting. So the main idea that we need to get firmly fixed in our minds is that the kind of peace we're exploring in this talk is not at all passive, as we tend to think that it is. It is an active power that we can apply in our lives for the good of all. In the Bible, it is described as the peace that passeth all understanding, because it is a peace that cannot be reasoned via the intellectual part of our being. We have discussions about political peace, social peace, religious peace, etc. But none of these have ever seemed to work for a prolonged amount of time. Many of these have provided stopgaps, but have all come to an end as a result of individuals or groups that could not live up to the ideal, as in the flower power, etc. Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of ahimsa, non-violence, and satyagraha, or soul force, were said to have failed and led to violence in the end. Well, this was not due to Gandhi's or the ideals. It was because his followers had not the moral fibre to live up to them. Sadly, this has been so throughout history. Periods of great reform, initiated by a great soul, have often been followed by wars or uprisings because of the inability of later followers to live the life set out by the reformer. And this is very evident as regards Jesus, who taught a doctrine of love, but for centuries Christians fought and murdered innocent people in his name. And the same can be said of Islam. He was known to say that those who live by the sword will die by the sword. But many of his followers paid no heed to this message. Of course, most of the followers of Christianity and Islam are good people, but we have fanatics who cause so much trouble. Leo Tolstoy, in his series of essays, The Law of Love and the Law of Violence, goes into this whole subject at length and wrote in a letter to Mahatma Gandhi, "Christ knew, just as all reasonable human beings must know, that the employment of violence is incompatible with love, which is the fundamental law of life. He knew that once violence is admitted, it doesn't matter if even in a single case, the law of love is therefore rendered futile. That is to say that the law of love ceases to exist. The whole Christian civilization, so brilliant on the exterior, has grown up on this misunderstanding and this fragrant and strange contradiction, sometimes conscious, but mostly unconscious. So love and peace are generally classed together. The hippies in the 60s would talk about love and peace and the revolution. What do we mean by revolution in a higher sense? H.P. Blavatsky again writes, I say it again, it is only theosophy well understood that can save the world from despair by reproducing social and religious reform, a task once before accomplished in history by Gautama the Buddha, a peaceful reform without one drop of blood spilt, each one remaining in the faith of his fathers if he so chooses. To do this, he will only have to reject the parasitic plants of human fabrication, which at the present moment are choking all religions and churches in the world. Let him accept but the essence, which is the same in all. That is to say, the spirit which gives life to man in whom it resides and renders him immortal. Let every man inclined to go on find his ideal, a star before him to guide him or her. Let him follow it without ever deviating from his path, and he is almost certain to reach the beacon of light and the beacon of life, the truth, no matter whether he seeks for it and finds it at the bottom of a cradle or of a well. Again, she wrote some beautiful words, very poetic and very powerful words. The key to this quote are the words theosophy well understood. Theosophy was brought back into the public eye because it was seen by the masses that the world needed to comprehend the true meaning of universal brotherhood. So attempts were made to make us aware of our oneness with our fellow human beings and the whole of nature, and to show us clearly where we stand on the evolutionary scheme. So this is the main reason for studying theosophy and trying to make it a living reality in our day-to-day lives. It should be our motive for all our studies, in whatever spiritual tradition. A study of theosophy gives us deeper insights into the workings of nature, and therefore greater opportunity to practice along more enlightened lines of thought. To be truly devoted to bringing peace on earth and goodwill to all beings, we must have a firm conviction that there must be no compromises created by indoctrination from society. So to quote again from Leo Tolstoy, from the same Law of Love and the Law of Violence, he says, this spring at a scripture examination in a Moscow girls' school, first their religious teacher and then an archbishop, who was also present, questioned the girls on the 10 Commandments, especially on the 6th, which thou shalt not kill. After the commandments have been correctly recited, the archbishop sometimes puts a question. Usually, is it always and in every case forbidden by the law of God to kill? And the unfortunate girls, misled by the instructor, had to answer, and did answer, not always, for it is permissible in war and at executions. When, however, this customary additional question, whether it is always a sin to kill, was put to one of these unfortunate creatures, he's put in brackets, what I'm telling you is not an anecdote, but actually happened and was told to me by an eyewitness. So the girl coloured up and answered decidedly and with emotion, always. And despite all the customary sophistries of the Archbishop, she held steadfastly to it that to kill is under all circumstances forbidden, even in the Old Testament. Although I think there's certain things in the Old Testament, I don't know really. And that Christ had not only forbidden us to kill, but in general to do any harm to our neighbour. The Archbishop, for all his majesty and verbal dexterity, was silenced, and victory remained with the girl. Good honour, eh? So for peace to be upon this earth, we need to believe in it wholeheartedly and to go about making it a reality in our daily lives. As I said earlier, it is only when peace thrives within us and around us that the conditions arise for truly spiritual progress. St. Francis of Assisi said, "While you are proclaiming peace with your lips, be careful to have it even more fully in your heart." While you are proclaiming peace with your lips, be careful to have it even more fully in your heart. It's beautiful words. So is it possible to live peacefully despite the cacophony of the world around us and within us? I think it is definitely possible so long as we don't place mental barriers in our way. We must go about finding that calm centre that is the eye of the storm. In fact, most of our being is in that vast ocean of spiritual calm. All the disturbances are like waves on the ocean that come and go within time. But often it seems to us, because of our immersion in the illusion of time, that the passing is almost imperceptibly slow. But it will pass in the end. All things must pass, as George Harrison once said. Therefore, we can all take heart and know that the river of our life is moving gradually towards that ocean and will one day become part of it. The drop will merge in the ocean and vice versa. I know to quote from a Sufi poet, Rumi, he says, "Move beyond any attachment to names. Every war and every conflict between human beings has happened because of some disagreement about names." It's such an unnecessary foolishness, because just beyond the arguing, there's a long table of companionship set and waiting for us to sit down. What is praised is one, so the praise is one too. Many jugs being poured into a huge basin. All religions, all this singing, one song. The differences are just illusion and vanity. Sunlight looks different on this wall than it does on that wall, and a lot different on this other one. But it is still one light. We have borrowed these clothes, these time and space personalities from a light. And when we praise, we pour them back into it. Again, just fantastic words. There's so many amazing teachers that give so incredible words. So we share the spirit like we share the sunshine. There's one of the same in every one of us here. I sometimes think of Jonathan Swift's novel, Gulliver's Travels, in one part where he mentions the big Indians and the little Indians, who went to war over which end of the egg should be opened first at breakfast. It was a satirical swipe at society, which goes to war over things sometimes almost as trivial as this. But is there ever a time or a reason for people to actively try to maim and kill their fellow human beings? Now, Tolstoy also argued that if society had developed along the lines taught by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, there'd be no need for police forces, armies, etc., which are trained to use coercion to keep people in order. Unfortunately, we have created Frankenstein's monster, and now it turns on us. And the way the world has become, we have made it so that these organisations are needed, and we follow a government that is totally materialistic in its outlook, which in its actions are diametrically opposed to what a spiritual thinking government would do. So the first and most important thing to remember on the spiritual path is that we must learn to follow our own inner voice. As B.P. Wadia writes in his article, The Inner Ruler, commenting on a quote from HPB, the first necessary qualification is an unshakable belief in one's own powers and the deity within oneself. Otherwise, a man will be simply developed into an irresponsible medium. The word medium is not to be taken in the ordinary spiritualistic sense, but as meaning a repository of other people's sundry thoughts, emotions, and aspirations, instead of developing one's own. We make ourselves largely a storehouse for other people's ideas and inspirations. What about our own, in the light of HPB's teaching in an unshakable belief in one's own powers and the deity within oneself. We are often in fear and trembling when our instincts and reasonings do not harmonise with other people's instincts and reasonings. Why should they? We have each of us our own peculiar way of growth. We must quit the attitude of the child clinging to its mother's apron strings. Unless we do this, we should not be able to apply HVB's teaching to ourselves individually. Throughout the whole mystic literature of the ancient world, we detect the same idea of spiritual esotericism, that the personal God exists within, nowhere outside of the worshipper. And B.P. Wadhya also talks about spiritual anarchy, taking the word anarchy in its true meaning, which is to be without rule. In a spiritual sense, this means to reach a state where we follow the dictates of our higher self. If we all have the same goal, then no matter how differing are our paths to that goal, then we will eventually meet in the same place, if we can use the word place. I think one of the key phrases in B.P. Wadhya's quote is to have an unshakable belief in one's own powers and the deity within oneself. It is learning to see oneself as a spiritual being rather than just a material one, and also to see the divine in others, to see one's fellow human beings as divine as well. And again, one of my favourite sayings from Pythagoras, take heart, for the race of man is divine. Take heart, for the race of man is divine. Therefore, we should never lose faith in human nature, no matter what happens, because we should become aware that all the cruelty and heartlessness that goes on in this world is like the waves on the surface of the ocean. Deep within, we all share the same divinity. Deep within, we are all one. It may be hard to detect at times, almost impossible sometimes, but it can be found if we are compassionate enough to try and see others in a spiritual light. Like the Bodhisattva never despised said, I cannot despise you, you'll all be Buddhas someday. And many through the ages have tried to see their fellow human beings in that light. Spiritual teachers, philosophers, poets, musicians, and artists, writers have strove to capture and express the beauty of the spirit in their teachings and their works to varying degrees. They have striven to see mankind at a deeper level than just the surface, to dive deep into the ocean of being and recover the pearl without price, the beauty and the dignity that lies in the silence and peace beyond the din of material life. In that silence and peace, one finds love, perchance, as a reflection of the harmony that reigns in the universe at the very core of our being. All the vagaries of life that flourish at the surface are transient. They come and go. What is real in us is eternal, beyond time and space, beyond past, present, and future. The inner vision begins to clear when we actively cultivate a peaceful and tranquil mind. When our minds are calm and harmonious, they reflect the harmony of the universe itself. The ocean is tranquil, and the moon is reflected in it perfectly, symbolising this clarity. When the mind is in turmoil, it is like the waves of the ocean breaking the image of the moon into 1,000 imperfect reflections. This is like life. We see everything in a distorted way. We see separation when there is in fact only unity. There's only oneness. Just one thing broken by our limited perceptions into myriad things. But it is only our mistaken and limited views that create the world around us and within us. We fail to see the oneness, so the mind compensates by creating the illusion of separateness. We call this Maya. In the voice of the silence, it is called, as I mentioned earlier, the great heresy of separateness. Love is the key to dissolving this heresy, not the sentimental emotionalism that most people call love, but the gradual attuning of our whole being with the harmony that lies at the heart of all things. A peace profound and alchemical that transforms the leaden dross of our earthly lives into the pure gold of a creative and inspirational insight into the truth of what we are, really beyond the limitations that make us see through a glass darkly. In our daily lives as spiritual aspirants, it may be good to listen to what HPB wrote. She says, real theosophy is altruism, and we cannot repeat it too often. It is brotherly love, mutual help, unswerving devotion to truth. If once men do but realise that in these alone can true happiness be found, and never in wealth, possessions, or any selfish gratification, then the dark clouds will roll away, and a new humanity will be born upon earth. Then the golden age will be there indeed. So this is what is lacking in a society that uses coercion and is based upon glaring inequalities and leaders who do not set the example to others, as I mentioned earlier. We are all heading to the same place. We are all fellow pilgrims on this same journey and should be making our way with self-devised efforts, self-devised methods and self-devised efforts, as HPB said. We are all different, therefore we should not judge others. We don't know another's motivation, another's journey, but we do know that they are on the same symbolic path. Therefore we should at least try to understand and love them, show pity, be gentle and kind, and pass the gentlest sentence possible on those who err, and try to help rather than condemn. It is a wonderful thing to think that we're all part of the never-ending story. One of my favourite films. To pinch a film title, of course. And HPB says, from strength to strength, from the beauty and perfection of one plane to the beauty and perfection of another, with accessions of new glory, of fresh knowledge and power in each cycle. Such is the destiny of every ego, which thus becomes its own saviour in each world and incarnation. And so we move ever on. What lies in the far distance we cannot possibly conceive of, because our consciousness is not yet developed enough to comprehend. We have limited views. It would be like trying to explain quantum physics to a day-old baby. But we know there is a path, albeit a pathless path, so we follow it, trusting those who have gone before. We are told that this earth is regarded as one of the hells, one of the worst places to be. So it can only get better. Greater clarity, deeper insights are to follow for those who are sincere. Sincerity is one of the most powerful attributes we can possess. The Shinto religion in Japan regards sincerity as the cornerstone of its beliefs. It is a great power for good. If we are sincere, we can work true magic in its true sense. And that is the key. We must remember to work for the good of all, though. Whatever we do thinks and affects everyone else. So one thing we must all do is to take heart, as Pythagoras tells us. So life seems hard at times, and we can be dispirited by so many things. But remember that at the heart of all things, there is this harmony, which HPB described in The Voice of Silence as the law of love eternal. We are all working towards the same endless end in different ways along a bumpy road, and there will be many heartbreaks along this path, but only as regards the lower part of our being. The spiritual heart can never be broken, nor the spiritual sun ever dimmed. And why can't we, like sunflowers, turn our faces towards that inner sun and find some consolation as we journey onwards? This is the real flower power that relies upon the light of the sun on many levels. The cultivation of that inner light. Remember what Rumi said? The sunlight looks different on this wall than it does on that wall. And a lot different on this one, but it is still one light. We have borrowed these clothes, these time and space personalities from a light. And when we praise, we pour them back in. On the way, we do not travel alone, but in company with our fellow pilgrims. I believe that everything that happens to us, seemingly good or bad, can be used as grist for the mill, as we say up here. I don't know whether you say it in people say in London or other places, and teach us invaluable lessons if we have but the right attitude. So let's journey on with hope as we continue this never-ending story. The saying goes also, in a song that I quite like, may the long-time sun shine on you, and all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide you on your way. And a couple of quotations that I really like on peace. The first one is by St. Francis, which probably everybody knows it. And it says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. So if we look upon our Master, the Master to be our divine nature or our higher self, we can look upon it as being the spirit within rather than the personal God, whichever way you want to look at it. So the world has been expert in ignoring the words of all the great teachers throughout the ages. You know, it's strange, all these great teachers came to earth to teach us these wonderful things, but no one seems to listen. Well, not to no one seems to listen, of course. There are people who do, but not enough. If they had been listened, there would have been less wars and conflicts. We would have practiced brotherhood and sisterhood and lived in harmony and peace. So the words of St. Francis can be used as a sort of mantra. We can go over it and meditate on it, and there's so much in there. As can many Buddhist prayers, such as this one, which I think is really beautiful. We are a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. We will keep our link bright and strong. We will be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than ourselves. We will think pure and beautiful thoughts, say pure and beautiful words, and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amida's chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Such beautiful words. In fact, I think I'll read it again. We are a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. We will keep our link bright and strong. We will be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than ourselves. We will think pure and beautiful thoughts, say pure and beautiful words, and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amida's chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. So Amida is the Buddha of infinite light, symbolic of that divine light in each one of us. I do really like the idea and the image of Amida. So with so many wonderful words to inspire us and give us guidelines how to live a peaceful and loving life, it is amazing how they have been rejected by the majority of society, particularly the followers of the world's religions, who should know better. Fortunately, there are those who are trying to live a spiritual life, keep the light shining in the midst of the darkness of our age. It is no small thing that these individuals and organisations are doing this, tending the sacred flame until the day when the world at large realises the insanity of wars often fought for trivialities, and that human life should be respected, and the only thing that we should be trying to cultivate is a universal brotherhood of humanity, regardless of race, creed, sex, caste, or colour. So Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace. Peace on earth and goodwill to all beings. And thank you.